Welcome from Seattle Indies. If you are new to Seattle Indies, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to focusing or to fostering a vibrant community of independent game developers in Seattle, Washington, and the Puget Sound area. We strive to provide inclusive and accessible spaces for all who wish to pursue game development as a hobby or as a profession.
Our focus is on hosting events and activities that empower people to build their skills and their professional network, make games, make friends, share feedback, and showcase their projects. Join the Seattle Indies Discord to continue the conversation with our community. Link is seattleindies.org to find out more. My name is Alchemist. I will be one of your hosts today. This is my, oh God, I don't think I know how many times I've been here doing these things, but
So many times.
I'm a content creator in the greater Seattle area. I've been on Twitch for about coming up on 10 years now, and I've worked with several nonprofits in the Seattle area, including the Seattle Indies.
Wow, Alchemist, you sound so distinguished. I love it. I'm Mac and Cheesley, as everybody calls me Mac, and I also have worked with Seattle Indies for a couple of years now, and I think I'm also coming up on 10 years on Twitch, which is absolutely crazy to think about, but happy to be here, and I'm so excited to talk to all the wonderful people we have up and for our panel today.
I'm looking forward to that as well, but we're going to be doing this a little different because before we start talking to the people on the panel, we're going to talk about a game jam that is the Games for Blind Gamers 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a quick video, and when we come back, we will come back with shiftBacktick, who is one of the representatives for that, and we'll be able to tell us a little bit more about that before we kind of move on to the meat of the show. So it's going to be this video coming up right about now.
If you were to make a blind accessible game in a month, what would it be like? They can be about exploring. They can be cozy.
Hi, I'm Zoe, your coworker. Welcome to your first day at the cafe. Your job.
Strategic.
B2 flanked.
They can be dramatic.
I must have been a fish in one of my previous lives.
Or adventurous.
Canelo. Now my blade will blur in the wind.
Levunado.
Mother goblin.
Or anything you want them to be. Join our 5th annual Game Jam starting February 2026 and help make gaming a more accessible space for everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. If you saw that video and you have questions, because I know I have a couple, we have just the individual to tell us a little bit more about it. So first of all, Shift, would you like to introduce yourself? Make sure you click the mute button because I made the mistake of almost having myself muted. So make sure you unmute before you introduce yourself. But tell the people at home a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, greetings, everyone. I'm shiftBacktick, and I'm a co-host of the Games for Blind Gamers 5 Jam. This year, the Games for Blind Gamers Jam returns for its 5th annual jam of making blind-friendly games. It continues a really long legacy of creativity and jams that started on audiogames.net, a forum by and for gamers and developers who are blind. Every year, our developers and blind judges come together for 1 month to explore accessibility in games, to see what works and push boundaries and certainly make mistakes, to make gaming a more inclusive space across the spectrum of sight. I like to think of us as one of the many incubators in the indie scene where our innovations trickle up into the mainstream. So this anniversary is very special for us. So to celebrate, we have several $100s in prizes for our winners, including game keys for popular blind-friendly games like Brock the Investigator and Doncaster. We hope that you'll join us for the month of February on itch.io and our Discord server to make it our best year yet. Thank you.
I sat here and thought about it. I have done 5 Seattle Indies, like 6 expos. And I'm always blown away by the creativity of indie developers. But I feel like a game jam like this takes that to a whole nother level, because I myself am sighted. Depending on which of my friends you're talking to, I may not be very well sighted, but I can at least see. And so there are some things that I just kind of take for granted in games, that just seeing that trailer made me realize how really innovative you can be and kind of have to be when developing games for blind gamers. So I know that we're going to be discussing accessibility with a couple of other people that we have brought alongside of you, but there are several questions that I'm looking forward to asking you and the other devs that are joined with us. So let's just bring the other devs on so we can get everyone here, and then we can give a quick introduction about each of ourselves, and then we can kind of get into the roundtable discussion.
Yeah, do you want to kick us off, Alchemist?
So my name, as I said, is Alchemist. Alchemist Joker is my full name, but you can call me Alchemist or AJ. I am a Black veteran gamer who has a short buzzed hair, and I'm currently wearing a 6/2023 t-shirt. Just for those visually impaired folks, you can kind of visualize what the voices sound like. And I'm really happy to be here.
I am Mac. I am a female with long brown hair, white with glasses, and wearing a light pink hoodie that says video games on it.
I'm Zach Clothier. I am a senior test lead for the Microsoft Gaming Accessibility Testing Service, who is legally blind and also a part-time indie developer. I am wearing glasses, have a short brown beard, long brown hair, and am wearing a shirt that I have no idea what the color is because I'm also colorblind.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chad Michael Boughton. I'm a blind accessibility consultant who's worked on both AAA and indie games. I also own my own company where I travel around the U.S. putting on workshops showcasing blind accessibility in video games to nonprofits. I'm a white, extremely pale white cisgender male, black hair, glasses, a little bit of a goatee, and I'm wearing a pink collared shirt.
Hey everyone, my name is Joshua Duchesne. Visual description, I'm a white male with long brown curly hair. I have a neatly kept beard. I'm wearing glasses and a black Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hoodie. I am a senior technical audio designer in AAA games. I'm currently working as an audio systems designer at ArenaNet. I've previously worked at In Exile Entertainment on their upcoming title Clockwork Revolution. And prior to that, I worked at 343 Industries on Halo Infinite.
I suppose that leaves me. My name's Andy Stefik. I'm a professor of computer science at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I have a very exciting green shirt. I do not have glasses on, although that mostly means I can't really see very well right now, but good enough for the computer screen. I've spent many years working on what's called the accessible graphics problem, which is that when you have blindness involved, getting computer graphics accessible is a tricky problem for lots of reasons.
And I'll jump back in really quick with the description. So this is shiftBacktick. I'm a human from planet Earth. I'm as pale as a vampire with long hair, and there's an electronic drum kit behind me. I'm also a web developer by day and a computer musician by night. When I'm not helping organize game jams like Games for Blind Gamers, I'm building procedurally generated interactive synthesizers that you explore from your web browser. Thanks.
That's awesome.
Okay. First off, I want you to know that I think it was 2 days ago when we were first meeting all of these lovely devs and all these lovely folks, we had a little bit of an interesting realization that there was a lot of musical instruments around behind us. And so with that being said, it became one of those really, really fun kind of notes to talk about. We all described what we look like, but I need you to know from where I am sitting, the background that Joshua has what looks like a grand piano over his, I would assume that is his right shoulder. And it's amazing to see. I know that it's not real, but it became an interesting kind of little factoid about him, and it let him share a little bit more about himself. So I kind of want to take what we did then and bring it forward to today. So I want each of you to kind of tell me a little bit about yourselves and the work that you do. And I'm going to make this easy for everyone, I'm going to start with one person and I'm just going to shuffle us all the way around. So we're going to start with Shift. We're going to go down to Chad, over to Stefik, up to Josh, and then finally ending on Zach. So with that being said, Shift, you're up first.
Sure thing. So let's see. I'm in my mid-30s, so I'm actually a late bloomer when it comes to game development, but I've been making sounds on the computer since Windows 95. I have a degree in computer music, which means that a lot of my studies involved Pro Tools, Max MSP, recording technologies. I've had a really varied career in web development, specifically marketing and design, but unemployment led me, during COVID, unemployment led me to audio games and kind of combining web development and music in the web browser, and all of those experimentations 5-6 years later somehow led me here to this wonderful panel.
All right. Well, I'll try and be brief because my journey is fairly interesting. As I mentioned, I am blind. I have been losing my vision since I was 11 years old due to retinitis pigmentosa, which is an inherited retinal disease. Both my sister and I actually both have RP. So at age 11 and age 10 for my sister, we've both been losing our visions. I'll be 33 this year in May. So it's been about, 20, almost 22 years now. So it's crazy to think it's been that long. I kind of stumbled my way into the accessibility world. Prior to losing my job to the pandemic, I was a philanthropist at a guide dog school out of South Florida, working in the corporate fundraising sector. And after I lost my job, I kind of just was trying to find where to go next in my life to just continue doing what I wanted to do. And just made me re-examine what my passions were. And I found gaming again because I had time. I was no longer working a 9-to-5 job, so I could play all the games I wanted to. And my sister just asked me a question one day saying, as someone who's blind, why do you still love to play games even though you can barely see them anymore? And that question really challenged me to think long and hard about why I love the game industry. And as a part of that, I wrote up this big article, sent it to about 30 different publications, asking if they would let me publish an article talking about accessibility in gaming. I got 29 no's, but I eventually got one yes from Nintendo Life. And they let me publish an article. And from there was just kind of a snowball effect. I eventually started recording some content, put out a podcast of my own. And through my podcast, I started reaching out to people to talk to, like Ian Hamilton, Brandon Cole, may he rest in peace, Tara Velker. And they all helped me. They, gave me the information I needed to start learning. And, I've been very fortunate to slowly, for the last 3 years, work my way into, learning what it takes to be an accessibility consultant. And it's been a really fun journey, and I'm having a very fun life.
Does that mean I take it?
Yep, that's you.
So I guess I'm the oddball on the piano. On the piano, jeez.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, so I'm a professor of computer science, tenured and all that stuff. So that's a pretty stable gig. But computer science is actually relatively rare to do accessibility work. There's lots of areas, but my background was actually, like apparently a lot of people on the panel, was actually music as well. I have a bachelor's degree in music. I worked with a ton of composers and have a couple of albums. Actually, my first consulting gig as an undergrad was converting music scores to linear algebra don't ask. It's a long story, but those all got published. Anyway, but when I went to graduate school, I started looking around to different communities of people, and I met a blind programming community of people that worked full time as blind professionals. And I just thought it was really fascinating because the challenges, oftentimes the challenges, people think it's something like, just tech or just this, but they're really multifaceted, quite complex. The different areas of computer science have more challenges than others. And games is a fascinating area for
Absolutely.
It just is. Yeah. I mean, there's so much nuance. And so about 10 years ago, my team and I started doing a lot of work on accessible graphics, and we just haven't really looked back. It's been a lot of fun. So.
Is that me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're up, Josh.
Yeah, we're going to do a little loop-de swoop.
Perfect. Great. So similar to a lot of the folks here, and as indicated by my fake piano in the background, I also started out as a musician. So throughout high school, I was in bands and performing musician throughout college and graduate school. And similar to Stefik, so just so you don't feel so alone, Stefik, I actually have a master's degree in university administration. So I am a previous academician as well, and in my current role, I do a lot of research for my current job as a systems designer. So
amazing, I love it.
Yeah, so I've got you. Don't worry. And so during my time in my graduate school program, that was where I really began to be exposed to needs of disabled people, and I worked in or people with disabilities, and I worked in primarily the role of understanding the transition from high school into college and then out of college. And that was sort of my focus of my graduate degree. And so during that time, that's when I really began to understand what do underrepresented student populations face. And I came from an underrepresented family in a handful of different ways. And so during that time was my first exposure to like the actual challenges that people with disabilities face in a world that's not necessarily built for them. And so that was kind of my exposure to it and how we could start building systems that work better for everybody. Fast forwarding several years later, I began working, playing around in the indie scene world as a composer and a sound designer. That's how I know the Seattle Indies crew is from my time working in the indie world. And I, from there, I got deep into the XR, VR, AR scene. And in that realm, a lot of the experiences really rely upon using different audio cues to do storytelling and convey gameplay information. And that was where I really began to understand how we can build games, especially as a sound designer and audio professional, for people that have differing abilities. One of the people I worked with was deaf in one ear, and so I learned the importance of like having monocompatibility for games. Was another stage into that. Fast forwarding into working on Halo Infinite, at that studio, we had a foundational principle of audio accessibility where gameplay clarity was the core of everything we did. And so anytime we had any question about how to build anything, it was always focused on, is it going to make the game clearer to the player or more confusing? And you always choose the option that is clearer. And that was the first time that I understood accessibility as a foundational principle that actually guides development and helps us make more accessible games. And through that and a lot of additional work that we did at the studio, we ended up winning the G.A.N.G Audio Award for Excellence in Audio Accessibility. And that has propelled me forward into every single role I've had since then. Audio accessibility is now the foundation of all the work that I do. And it is the lens through which I see the entire audio development process. And now I'm here.
All right. So as I said, this is Zach Clothier. I am legally blind. I was born with a condition called achromatopsia, which basically makes me incredibly light sensitive, really blurry vision, and 100% colorblind. And my tale begins on a tragic day in 2005 when I was playing Madagascar for the GameCube. One of the first things that game makes you do is a fishing mini game where you got to get 3 or 5 of the same color fish in a row. This was agonizing as someone who was completely colorblind, and I remember at a young age I was thinking like why can't games be playable for people like me? And so then as I got older, like that kind of evolved into be like, well, I can be the person that can make those games. And so I pursued an education in video game design. And as I was going through that, I learned about like the accessibility community and found that there were a lot of other disabled gamers, such as myself, who struggled to play a lot of games. And so I got through college, and about 6 months after college, I was at G.A.N.G, and met with someone from Microsoft who she got me a job at the Microsoft Gaming Accessibility Testing Service as a consultant. And I just kind of worked my way up, now being one of the test leads there, where we take games and provide developers with reports on how they meet certain accessibility standards. And we also facilitate the accessibility tags on the Xbox store to provide information to players on how games meet certain accessibility standards. And it's just always my goal in either the games I'm consulting on, the games I'm testing, the games I myself am making. I'm always just hoping to make games more and more accessible, because no one should have a traumatic experience like I did with Madagascar on the GameCube.
Absolutely.
The only traumatic experiences in gaming should be reserved for Souls-likes and Souls-likes only. That is a part of the game. That is how they're designed. That and playing like defector games or party games with friends who are very, very innocent faced, who then turn
I think you're
an
talking
entire
about
room.
me. Hey,
I'm just saying, but I'm gonna leave it to you because I don't want to get voted off the airlock again. So
he's never gonna let me live that one down. All right, let's shift some gears here. So let's talk about some pioneering and experimenting with accessibility. Shift, when you were giving your intro, you said something that just has been tickling my brain ever since. So you said that Indies gives an opportunity for like a trickle up effect into the bigger game studios. Can you talk a little bit about how Games for Blind Gamers has like had an opportunity to experiment with something, and then you've seen it relayed into other studios or even other games?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So for the Games for Blind Gamers Jam, specifically, we are typically engaging folks who are thinking about accessibility for the first time. And we're engaging a lot of sighted individuals with accessibility. So something really interesting happens when you bring a bunch together, folks together with an experience in this, is that they will come up with the most novel, interesting solutions to problems that we think we've iterated into the ground and already solved. And like, we just deeply appreciate the alternative perspectives that come from these jams.
Sure.
And I think like with blind accessibility features in gaming and in general, like as I mentioned before, like there's this rich history with the audiogames.net forum. In fact, they recently had, I believe, their 20th anniversary recently. And this forum of blind gamers and developers, like the whole purpose of them coming together is to share guides with each other on how to play games that are inaccessible to them, to create accessibility mods for games that never had accessibility in mind for them at all, to start game jams and build communities around the games that they are building by and for themselves. And like we mentioned Brandon Cole, who is a member of that community, and the contributions that he and others from the community have led directly to the accessibility innovations that we see in games like The Last of Us 2, Forza Horizon 5, Diablo 4, etc. All these big AAA games, but they started with folks experimenting with screen readers and bleeps and bloops on their computers, just trying to make things work for them. And ultimately, these things are driving the modern landscape of what we see in accessibility.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any experiences that they've seen working on a smaller project or something that has shifted into a bigger scope?
Well, one is concepts like accessible graphics are something that it's interesting because on the one hand, it's really easy to think of something that is highly graphical and then immediately presume that it cannot be accessible. It's sort of a natural reaction when you think about it. But the catch is, one of the hard things to understand is that accessibility often doesn't work by representing pixels to people that are blind. It doesn't really work that way. It works by sending basically information about the graphics. And then people that use something like a screen reader, they interact with information, not so much like this is red, this is blue, this is green. And one of the things, since you asked about going into something bigger, it's interesting that there's a game engine called, I believe, Godot. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Godot. I don't know what it is. But yeah, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. I only read. But interestingly, that particular engine added some accessibility recently, which I only heard about because they copied one of our technologies internally that we made open source many years ago, which then got copied by a bunch of other devs that were actually connected to Microsoft, and then it got pushed into there. So sometimes academic research kind of like lives in this little hole where nobody ever reads, but apparently that one made it into something somewhat real, which I was kind of excited about. Godot, is that what they call it? Oh, interesting. So that's good to know, actually.
So you mentioned accessible graphics, and I've heard you mention it a couple times. I heard you mention it we were talking about this on Tuesday, and I've had some time to kind of think about it. And I've realized now that I've been sitting here thinking about it, that I can think of a game that has accessible, that I think has that type of implementation in it. And I want to try to describe it so you can tell me if I'm thinking about it the right way. So there is a fighting game called Street Fighter 6. Now, fighting games are traditionally, I always assumed they would be very, very difficult for blind or low vision gamers, because fighting games are difficult for sighted gamers because there's frame data and distancing and with punishes which rely on spacing. And I couldn't imagine how a blind gamer could play that. But I remember the first year the game came out, there was a player named, his name is Blind Warrior Sven, and he was at, I want to say it was like Frosty Faustings or some other big tournament. And he's a completely blind gamer, and he was playing on the main stage. And it was one of those moments of like, you hear that sentence, your brain goes, wait, no, how could that even work? And so I loaded up Street Fighter 6 and I turned on that mode. And I found it intriguing that the thing that they do is that there are different like audio beeps for how far away you are from your opponent. The hit sounds have different sounds, so you can know like what's a high, what's a low, what's a mid, what's a cross up. And it expanded my mind because it was one of those things that I hadn't considered, that audio could be used in that way, because I play a lot of first person shooters. And a lot of times I have not, and this is the thing that I hadn't realized until very recently, is how much my ears matter more in a like slower paced first person shooter than my eyes do. Because if I hear an opponent reloading, or like to give an even more recent example, there's a game that I was playing called Arena Breakout Infinite, and you can have scopes that you can adjust the sight distance on. Well, when you adjust them, they make a specific noise. So I was in a match with my friends, and we had gotten into an engagement with another player, and I heard the sound of a scope switching. So I asked my teammates, like, yo, are any of you messing with your scope right now? And all of them were like, no, we're not changing anything. And it let me realize, oh, hey, we got two players that at least on the other side of this wall, because I'm hearing footsteps in one spot and I'm hearing the scope switching sound somewhere else. So is that kind of what accessible graphics is just like converting the things that we take for granted in a game into an audio format, like the distances in Street Fighter?
That's actually a great question. I love how you're describing it. Yes and no. So yes, you're often taking computer graphics and turning it into something, but it takes a couple forms. One type of thing, and this is probably the most common in games, so which is why I love your example so much, is because in a game like Street Fighter, it involves real-time interaction, right? I mean, well, except in my case, I just die, but that's not. I mean, facts. But in a game like that, where you have real-time interactions, the traditional model whereby you'd send information to the operating system and there's all sorts of funky rules really just wouldn't work, because it would like send a message to the screen reader and it would give you something kind of in pseudo real time, and all of a sudden you're dead. So from that perspective, that has to be how accessible graphics would work with a game like that. But there's another thing that's really odd about accessible graphics, and that is operating systems and web browsers and all sorts of these technical tools. They actually have this weird, like, magical land where information is sent to the operating system. And weirdly, you can trick graphics systems into sending it to that magic land. And when you do that, weird magic things happen. And so I'll tell you a couple. Imagine this. You're a blind person, you want to be an architect. Well, it's all 3D modeling. Well, guess what? You need to know certain things to do it. Move things around, add things, add a floor, stuff like that.
Right.
You're doing 3D modeling. Well, you need to know anchor points. You need to know all sorts of stuff to make that there. And so you're not just going to have a sound, you're going to have information. But weirdly, this magic land has these properties that are very yucky. So for one of the things that's really odd, just as an example, as the amount of 3D items that grows on the screen happens, you hit this phenomenon called accessible starvation. And I know that sounds really odd. What it means is the graphics will go at full speed and the accessibility tools will slow down so that they're not in real time. It's really bizarre. We found it in an academic paper a few years ago by accident when all of our tools were slowing down and we couldn't explain it. And then we eventually found some tricks to try to get around it in certain cases. This is like if you're using OpenGL or Direct3D or some of these kind of game, YouTube Vulkan, some of these tools like that. So the point is, accessible graphics really does mean the heart of what you're saying. You should be able to meaningfully interact with it, even if you can't see the screen. But depending on the kind of application you're using, it has different qualities and parameters and rules and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's a good explanation or not, but that's the best I can
that was a perfect explanation.
Well, I'm also curious from Joshua, from your standpoint as an audio designer, what Alchemist was describing, is that also a little bit of a feature that you try to do with games?
Yeah, 100%. The whole time he was talking, I was like, oh yes, this stuff, this is my world.
I know this.
Yeah. So having worked on Halo Infinite throughout the development cycle, this is exactly the kind of stuff we thought about constantly. So one of the things you mentioned right away was spatial audio cues. So you could tell there were two players at different positions, and that's because we will spend a lot of time mixing these games so that they work well with spatial audio. So something like Halo, we have it supporting Dolby Atmos, Windows Sonic, DTS, Headphone X. Like, it's designed to support every different spatial audio platform you can. And a lot of the times, the nice thing about binaural audio is that you only need headphones to hear it. You can use crappy little earbuds, and you can still get perfect spatial sound because of the way that HRTF algorithms work and the way that spatial audio algorithms work. I don't need to get into the details, but that is something that the tech just does for you, more or less. And since these games are built in a 3D engine, that can work really well if you know how to tune your mix really well. So then you got spatial audio cues. You have other things like critical gameplay cues will only use bespoke sounds. So you mentioned there's a specific sound when you click that scope. So when you're making audio, often you have to duplicate assets and copy paste assets for the sake of, you just can't have infinite numbers of sounds because there's scope and there's budget requirements. But for critical gameplay information, it is important to make sure you have bespoke sounds for all of those things. So this one sound will only ever mean this one thing in the game because it conveys critical gameplay information. If it's an environmental ambience like a bird chirping and it doesn't have anything to do with anything that's important other than like set dressing, that you can use that same bird everywhere, pitch it up and down a little bit, lower the volume, put some filters on it, put some reverb on it. That same bird can be all over the map and it'll sound like a different bird. It doesn't matter, but that critical sound has to be bespoke. Another thing would be things like abstract sounds versus organic sounds. So the more important a sound needs to be for gameplay, you want to often push it into a more abstract sense. Now, this is a bit subjective, but the way that I like to view it is that if, for example, in Halo, when you're playing any MP modes, any multiplayer modes like Capture the Flag or Stronghold or Slayer, any of those sorts of things, whenever somebody grabs a flag, for example, you want that sound to be incredibly distinct, and you don't want it to sound like it could be confused with an environmental piece, right? So you don't want it to sound like a literal flagpole, because that could be the sound of some environmental audio that's a flagpole clanging against something. So that sound is big and bold and weird and unique, and it has synthesizers in it, and it's very obvious that you know exactly what just happened without looking anywhere. You hear, I just know the enemy grabbed our flag and they're now running, and I know exactly where it happened because we made sure to spatially place it. But that's a case where you wouldn't use a typical spatial attenuation to sound real. You would use a flat attenuation so you hear it no matter where you are in the world. So you're going away from realism into something abstract because you need to convey that information perfectly to the player. So these are the kinds of decisions we're making all the time in game development on the audio side. And we're building our games to make sure that we are hitting these things. These are very, very intentional. If you play a game and you know what you're doing because the audio is working for you, those sound designers and the audio team probably worked really, really hard and established these principles at the foundation to ensure that that is the experience. And they probably had play testers come and play it and give that sort of feedback. So yeah, but that's a little peek behind the scenes of like some of the things that we do intentionally to make sure these games are playable, even if you can't see well and if you're blind or low vision.
So you bringing that up actually is it connected some dots in my head that I don't think I ever had connected previously. Because
Same, I'm like blown right now. This
Right?
is awesome.
So I've mentioned that I was a veteran. So to give a little bit more information about that and how it relates to this, I've gone to the gun range and I fired actual weapons before, right? And this is going to be, I need you all to stick with me for a moment because this is going to be a really weird kind of specific example, but I think, and Josh will probably be able to express how that makes sense to him, right? So when you're firing a real weapon, there's a thing called a tactical reload versus an empty reload, right? If you've ever played like a first-person shooter, you know, like you'll see them go to reload and they'll take a full mag, they will remove the mag that still has rounds in it, put the new one in, and in real life, you would tuck that back in your mag pouch. In most modern video games, I think Modern Warfare 2019 was the one that kind of pioneered this. But if you reload your weapon while it is completely empty, you just drop the mag. It's just you drop the mag, you slap a new one in, which is great. But most times you have on screen an ammo counter, so it doesn't really matter as much. However, there were a couple of different modes, hardcore, for example, where your HUD is gone. And one of the things that I found to be, at first I didn't realize why it worked the way that it did, but I could tell to the round when I was empty. Like it was one of those things that I was like, I don't know how. And I remember talking to my fiance and trying to explain it to her because she was starting to play COD with me because she had played like Valorant and things like that. And she was wanting to use a sniper rifle. And she was like, oh, how do I know how many rounds are in it? And I'm like, you just got to listen for the click. And she goes, what do you mean listen for the click? And so I was playing the game and I was streaming it. And I heard this click clear as day because it's that blam, 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 ping. And it's that last round going back. And in real life, it's the sound of your bolt arresting to the back, right? So that's how I, as a soldier, would know, oh, I'm empty without having to look at my weapon. It is amazing to know that real life thing that you just kind of learn as you're drilling it, that I have taken for granted for years, is something that audio designers go to great lengths to recreate. Like you saying, like things have bespoke sounds. There are 7 different grenades in a particular game, but the sound of the pin coming off of them is the same for everyone because you need to be able to hear, oh, someone has a party popper around that corner. I don't know what flavor of party popper. It could be the blind deaf version. It could be the spaghetti on the wall version. I don't know, but I just know because of the nature of that particular input that I need to not be here. And so it is wild to think about that something that a lot of gamers take for granted probably gets more attention to it than the graphics will. And don't get me wrong, graphics nowadays are gorgeous. But if you ever want to play a game with a challenge, turn the audio off and listen to how many things like parry sounds, like in Souls-like games, or even the sounds of jumps in Mario games. Like Every game has audio cues that you don't realize how much you need them. Which, pro tip, real quick, for all of you gamers at home, right? If you want to be better at your first person shooters, this is going to seem like a really common sense thing, but a lot of people don't do it. Turn the background music down real low. I know the music is great. I know I can feel Josh going like, there's a lot of work that goes into that. Turn the background music down really low and turn up the like footstep noise and like the contextual sounds. Like keep the sound effects high, and you will notice immediately how much better you do, because there's all these little sounds that you just never notice. And the fact that you're like, nah, this has to be a bespoke sound, like that has to be the same everywhere, is wild. So on behalf of gamers, both sighted and unsighted, thank you for caring so much about audio, because it makes the game, it makes it more fun. It also
feels live.
It does. But it also means some nerds who learn how that stuff works can definitely use it to their advantage. So sorry, I just need to get that out of my system. We can focus back on. I hope this will double my 0 kills in Fortnite. Stefik, listen, I can infinitely double your 0 kills in Fortnite, and you'll have the same experience. I promise.
But all of this is interesting. So we're talking about audio, we're talking about some graphic stuff, but I want to hear from Zach, who is a senior lead accessibility tester. What are some of accessibility features that are common in games, but might not actually be useful for other players?
Well, when you say that, the first thing that comes to mind is colorblind options are something that most colorblind players have not liked how most games implement them, because most of the time they just use a full screen filter. And like, I can speak as someone who has a rare form of colorblindness. They always do 3 types of colorblind filters. I have tested probably 1,000 games in my time. I've only ever seen 5 games have a colorblind filter for my type of colorblindness.
Oh, wow.
But one of the fundamental issues with color in games is that a lot of games use color to communicate important information. And colorblind people just can't tell what the colors are. Like a filter is not going to change it that much. Like if a game says, hey, take the green path, a lot of players who are colorblind aren't going to fully understand that. So that's why when you're developing a game, you either need to have a more involved colorblind options, like letting the player manually choose colors of things. Like Call of Duty does this for their mini maps. They used to have just something called a colorblind mode. I don't even know what it did, but they now let you individually change the color of HUD elements and stuff. Or you need to, from the core game design, you need to be thinking about how to communicate things with not just color, but in other ways, like using different icon types or
I've seen that. Like shapes.
Different shapes, different icons, even just like you can communicate things with color, but then also maybe like have a way where you can highlight it and show what color it is. Like that's kind of one of the big things that I feel like is a poorly implemented thing, or I don't even want to know if I should say poorly, just like not fully understanding the reason why players who are colorblind will struggle in games. And I feel like that's why it's just really important to always be talking with the community who need these features about the certain things that they want to see in games to be able to understand how to properly implement them.
Absolutely. And Chad, as a consultant, do you have any input on this as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're always trying to. I mean, on one hand, when you're consulting on a game, you'll have developers come in and they'll want you to test their game, their current build, wherever it is. And of course, they want honest feedback. And, it's great that you can, of course, tell them when something isn't working and, why it might present an accessibility barrier to players. But I guess, like, for me, it's important to always remember, like, try to remember that I'm not the only one that's going to be playing this game when it's finished and released. There's going to be
Sure.
players of all levels. So it's very important to remember, like, what is a player who's never played a game before or is just getting into accessibility settings because of their lived experience and their current journey with vision loss and blindness. What will they need that's important for them? And obviously, while I do have some functioning vision, I play games as a totally blind gamer because even though I have light perception and can see shapes and movement, none of that information is actually helpful for me as a player. So, you know, I need audio description, a screen reader, navigational assistance, auto targeting. So when I consult, I am talking about things from a totally blind perspective. I will never consult for things from a low vision or a legally blind. So things like, you know, high contrast or colorblind modes, because those are things I can't see. And I don't ever want to talk about things that, you know, I personally don't have the lived experience to really help, you know, speak for that part of the community. You know, it's better that if I get asked by a developer, like, hey, what do you think about colorblind modes? I'm like, I'd rather push them to someone who can answer that for them or give them the resources so that they can check it out for themselves, because it won't do me any good to try and give them those answers because I'm not the right person to give them that answer.
So I have a kind of a follow-up question on that, Chad. So you mentioned that that's a thing that has to kind of be baked into the game. For blind and low vision players, like, what accessibility decisions do you feel must be made before production ever even begins? Like, what are the things that you think that they have to go, okay, we want our game to be played by as many people as possible. For our blind and low vision players, we need to do this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, you know, first, the thing I would ask of developers is always, you know, try and seek out community. You know, I know Xbox does an amazing job with their research accessibility team, where they allow players of all levels and experience to come in and have the ability to, you know, get involved with their amazing program over there and, you know, speak to developers. And I love that they do that because it allows people to understand that their voice has power and that their lived experience does matter. You know, there's nothing better than being told by a developer that, like, what you said was very insightful. So, of course, seeking out information from the people who are, of course, going to be benefiting from these accessibility features when they are implemented, you know, that's super important. I guess what I think is interesting that, like, I'd love to see more, maybe kind of like, and I don't know how we would implement it in terms of a standard for the industry, but, like, you know, for totally blind gamers, I'd love to see, like, okay, we're always going to have a narrator, we're always going to have navigational assistance, and we're always going to have audio description. Like, we're at least going to always have those three things when we start our game, because one, it'll help our players get from A to B, hopefully start and finish our game. You know, it'll allow them to access the UI, the icons, and then, of course, you know, what was it? Oh, they'll allow players to understand what these worlds look like and what their characters look like, so that they have more immersion and more experience with the, you know, the core gameplay experience and the narrative. So there's so many things, and of course, it's always down to a personal experience. You know, some players will want to use all of the auto targeting, while others will want to try and do the game themselves. You know, want to have as little impact as possible because they want to feel as though they have the power when it comes to the gaming. You know, a lot of players don't want to just press A and the game plays itself. They want to do all the shooting. They want to do all the aiming. So it's important for developers to think about that.
I mean, if I could have that function be a thing where I just press A and the game plays for me in certain games and certain lobbies, listen, I'm not saying that I want someone to just dog walk people talking trash in League of Legends when I press one button on my keyboard, but I would laugh maniacally the entire time. I'm just saying, I don't know if I can be trusted to use that power for good. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a good example of that is like Forza Horizon versus Forza Motorsports. You know, there's an auto drive where you just press the button and then the car's driven for you. Where in Motorsports, Brandon Cole worked extremely hard to create a blind drive assist mode, which is absolutely amazing. And for someone like me, who I thought I'd never be able to play at least like a extreme racing game ever again, to be able to start learning the mechanics of that assist mode that Brandon created along with Playground and Turn 10, it was really cool to see, all the considerations that had to be made in order to make that system work. So instead of holding A just to have your car drive itself, you're learning the shifting, you're learning the braking, the acceleration, that's what is really cool. It's like, giving the players the ability, and, it's their choice. It's up to them, I feel like when everybody can play, everybody wins. And that's the most important part when I feel, at least when it comes to accessibility.
I just want to follow up.
Oh, no, please. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to follow up on what Chad said. Like, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given about accessibility is increase accessibility, don't decrease agency. Like, players want to play the games. So you shouldn't just have an option to just immediately do everything for you. You can find unique ways of creating solutions to different issues. Like, I was working on a game in college where the whole mechanic of the game was to reflect projectiles back at enemies. And I was thinking, just to make it easier for players who struggle with this kind of stuff, I'll just have an option where you can just automatically reflect. But then after talking, it was okay, that takes away the whole point of playing the game. That might be nice for some players, but the vast majority of players are going to want to do the reflection mechanics. So I instead added a thing where you can manually change how lenient you want the timing of the reflection to be. And there was a lot of good feedback from that from players. And I think just providing options is a great way to increase accessibility. It doesn't even have to be directly an accessibility option. Just the more you can let a player customize their experience, the more it can be accessible in many different ways. Sometimes even ones that you wouldn't really consider it initially when adding the setting.
Well, and that leads into what I was going to say, which is interesting when you're talking about don't take away the game from the player. Shift, when you have a game jam and you're doing stuff for the games for blind gamers, what are some of the specific design considerations that as a dev you're trying to think of? Well, I want this to happen. I want this to be accessible, but I also want them to be able to play the game, not have the game play them, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the answer comes in two parts, relating to what are the fundamental design considerations, and further the empathy that we're building with players. So for me personally, and what I advocate to participants in the Games for Blind Gamers Jam, is that multi-sensory design is a must. So earlier we were talking about colors and how they alone aren't sufficient for conveying information. And in my notes, I have a web development analogy, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Success Criterion 1.4.1, use of color. And the whole purpose of that success criterion is to avoid only one way of distinguishing information. So to use multiple sensory details like text and icon. And I feel like the same sorts of things can apply to game design and game mechanics as well. So an example that's on top of my mind might be, say, your player falls and you take fall damage. So the multi-sensory approach to that, you could flash the screen, play a really loud thud sound, and vibrate the controller so that everybody gets the idea regardless of their ability. And then my personal approach to games, because I typically try to create more relaxed experiences is that I try to be lenient to the player, but not necessarily easy. And I think this leads directly from what Zach was discussing earlier. Like I asked myself, like, what is the purpose of something like an invisible wall in a game? If they don't serve the fun, then why have them? You should let the character climb and fall and swim, etc., and do as much as possible without penalties. Or if you have a forest full of trees, you should ask yourself, do they really need collisions? Like, what do these things serve as a purpose in the game world? Can we just pass right through them? Maybe are they interactive? And if they're interactive, is the precision of that interaction really necessary? Or can you interact with those trees and chop them and collect the wood from a distance or whatever? And ultimately, like, while being lenient, you can still have very deep systems. Like exploration can be deep when you add abilities to the mix, or crafting can be deep when you have upgrade trees, or the narrative can be deep when you give it an engaging story. So ultimately, when it comes to like empathy, my personal philosophy is to let players feel in complete control of the soundscape. So I try to find intuitive audio that reacts to the player. I try to do that delicately with intentionality. I like to let players experiment and learn at their own pace, kind of in a way of that childhood sense of wonder that we have, like running through the woods, hitting trees with sticks and stuff, sticking your finger in a light socket, whatever.
Okay,
I like
pause.
to test.
Chat, don't do that.
A little
Don't stick
specific.
your
I
finger
don't
in
know.
You can run through the forest and hit trees with sticks. Do not stick your finger in the light socket. It will be a shocking experience and not in a good way.
Yeah, you only got to do that once.
I was going to say shit, but I don't know. It sounds a little personal.
So like I like to test the boundaries of like where exactly within the game can we let players loose. And typically I do that earlier than a lot of games in what I make. Like I sometimes within the first few minutes, because I personally trust players' intuition, I trust their intelligence, I trust their literacy. And obviously I make really wrong assumptions about that all the time when I'm making games. It never really works exactly as I expect. It commonly leads to frustration with players, especially for those who really want their hands held. And they can be really good at identifying problems with that approach, but not necessarily with offering solutions. So like when I work in a project for the Games for Blind Gamers Jam, I'm typically always evolving that approach that I take to find that really extremely careful balance between what I want and what players tell me that they need. So like with this jam, I'm really excited about the project that I'm building for it. It involves using a telescope to reach toward things and feel them in the sky. And so I'm combining like the multi-sensory of audio, visual, and haptics with that. And I kind of want to explore and tell a story about you kind of managing this museum and the things you can do with this weird telescope that kind of captures all your different senses and does so in a blind-friendly way.
I'm so excited to play your game.
So cool.
I have a quick question though, because I've heard from two different developers about accessibility and adding accessibility tools, and I kind of want to throw this to Stefik. What do indie companies and developers really need for making their games more accessible, from your opinion?
You know, it's tough actually, because sometimes when, at least in academic land, when we think of, which is a very boring place, when we think of accessibility, at least at the global scale, most of the time when people talk about it, they talk about regulations, right? And to be boring just for a second, I think there's something like 30 countries now that use pretty much the same regulations for accessibility. Europe just passed a new law last year. Canada has had these in place for a long time. passed a new regulation last December. Even the United States has had these rules for a little while now. And they're great, but they're not for games, right? They just don't apply very well across applications that are designed to be fun as opposed to, or engaging, or, they don't have rules about good storytelling, right? Like it's just not what they do. So it's a little bit tricky to say what they should do, in part because what makes a good game is such a difficult question on its own. Like, I actually really appreciate what Josh was saying, because he's not talking about trying to meet some reg or some rule. A lot of it, I suspect, in 20, 30 years, we're going to have a heck of a lot better idea about an answer to that question than we do today. I feel like right now, a lot of us kind of fly by the seat of our pants, at least to a degree. Maybe I'm wrong, but my hunch is that it's a good question. I don't really know the answer. I think there's a lot of nuance right now. We're kind of so.
Can I share something that I was thinking was, I think one thing that developers really need, honestly, is just like more awareness about things. Like, as I was telling my story earlier, like, I wanted to make games for players who are blind, but I had no idea about like the accessibility community until I was older. And so that's why I think things like this are really important, that we're out here, we're sharing our stories, we're talking about what works, what doesn't, so we can help teach other people, because like eventually it's just going to reach more and more people, and then it's going to kind of go into their like fundamental designs of when they're starting games or when they're just thinking about things. So I think it's important that we just keep spreading the word, trying to tell as many people, and it'll eventually just become more and more of a normal thing to be adding these accessibility features, or just learning, like people can come up with new ideas that might be huge changers because they might have a unique idea that can be a huge accessibility assistant.
Sure. And Joshua, what foundational accessibility principles do you think developers can apply to their own work regardless of team size, budget?
Yeah, so this is a huge one, and I think Zach actually really hit on it just now. The idea that at the core is awareness. We have to start there, because so many developers are just so busy doing their jobs that this is often considered an extra thing you have to tack on. Accessibility is often looked at as like, oh, this is another Jira ticket I have to look at, rather than a lens through which you view everything you build, right? And if you can get that accessibility awareness at the very beginning of every development cycle as a foundational principle, it starts to influence the way you go through pre-production, right? That means that your systems are going to be designed in a way that something that Shift was talking about, this idea of having like using dual coding theory, the concept of the way our brains process information with a distinct verbal and nonverbal channel. When you combine them, it increases retention and immersion and engagement. And so if you can have your systems built early on with the intent of accessible design, then you know to build something that's going to simultaneously trigger the audio cue, the visual cue, your on-screen textual cue, and your haptics cue. But if you try to retrofit that stuff in later, it's incredibly expensive. And it takes a lot of time and energy, and it wastes cycles and budget, and it pushes launch cycles back. So this is actually a financially beneficial position for studios to take from day one. This isn't just about retrofitting something in at the end. You can save money. You can have a clearer development process. You can build better, simpler, cleaner systems that are more data driven and end up ultimately resulting in a much better designed game, right? The idea here, like my core thesis is that accessible design is simply better design. And when we begin to think of it that way, like it makes it very obvious. And this is especially important for people working at big studios when they have the pencil pushers that are saying, won't this cost us a lot? And we say, well, no, when you think about accessibility, for free, you get gameplay clarity. You get reduced cognitive load. You get learnable languages, sonic languages or visual languages. You get enhanced immersion and engagement. And nobody in a C level at any big studio is going to say, we don't want those things in our game, right? That's the stuff that they're constantly chasing, right? Those are the things that that you're putting all these dev cycles into. And literally by having accessibility as the foundation, of when you begin thinking about every system you design, every piece of the game, you get all that stuff for free automatically. And so this is where one of my big drives in the industry, especially in AAA, is to try to help people see that accessibility at the foundational level is critical. It will make your game better. It'll make your development cycle better. And it can even make developing easier. Like if you're building simpler systems, those systems are going to enable creativity in the development team because they don't have to think about external variables that don't necessarily fit into a clean, simple, streamlined system. And this goes into developer accessibility as well. So this isn't just for gamers. If you build better systems internally, better, cleaner, smarter tools, you are now making it easier for developers with disabilities to build the games inside the studios.
Reminds me of the blueberry muffin analogy.
What was that, Chad? I missed it.
I said it basically, like, when you were speaking, I was just reminding myself of the blueberry muffin analogy that I've always heard about when it comes to, like, kind of like basically thinking of like accessibility like a blueberry muffin. How would you like to make your blueberry muffin? Would you like to put the blueberries in the batter before you go to bake the muffin? Or would you rather just bake a muffin and then take a handful of blueberries after you just come out the oven and then just, jam them into that muffin? Just mash them in.
Yeah.
And that's
like and
I like to think of it, I think of that when it comes to accessibility. Like, how would you like to build your blueberry muffin? Should you start at the very beginning, right as you're starting to build your game? Or would you rather just build the game and then, like Josh said, retrofit it afterwards?
And
yeah,
do you guys feel like that's happening in the game space where accessibility is an afterthought, or are you seeing that more conversations are happening, as Zach is saying, with the awareness becoming bigger and bigger, that it's happening early on, or is it just kind of all the above?
I mean, I guess from my perspective as a consultant who's kind of, for what I've experienced myself, a lot of developers are really good at approaching it like from the beginning.
Good, yeah.
And they're really good at reaching out before they even begin to think about making their next game, or even if they have an idea about their next game, they're already looking to communities for their games when it comes to accessibility, and they're sitting down having conversations and already pre-planning how they want to implement accessibility into the game, because they might have a certain mechanic or just aesthetic that they want to present in their game. So personally, from what I've experienced, I feel more developers, at least just for me, I feel they're being really good at starting very early, of already having the discussion of, do we want accessibility in our game? Yes. Okay, then we should probably start talking about it right now. Now, are there some studios out there that maybe are retrofitting still? Possibly, and yes, but at least from what I've been experiencing, a lot of the developers are like, before even day one, day zero, they're already thinking about it.
We'd love to hear it.
I think also too, one thing, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, was like spreading awareness. Like certain things that players just now sort of expect to be in games a lot of times are accessibility features. Like if you go back and play older games, you go to the options pages, like you're lucky if there's like 3 or 4 options. Like it used to be super bare bones, but like as games have evolved, developers have heard feedback from even like non-players with disabilities that like people are like, hey, I want to be able to control the volume. Hey, I want to be able to input remap. Those things are accessibility features as well. So just at their core, like games are just becoming more and more accessible. Or even a big one for me is like most studios nowadays have very clean like serif font text that they use everywhere. Or if it is a serif font, it's just an easy to read one. Like older games used to use the wackiest fonts ever, and like,
what does that say?
Like Super Mario 64 is my favorite game of all time. I have never been able to read the dialogue in that game. Like, and so that's just a thing that's kind of spread throughout the industry, is they know people want to be able to easily read it, so they make it nice and clean. So accessibility is definitely getting better and better. I mean, it's already come like so far just in like the last 5 years. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. And I didn't even realize that, like, even being able to control the audio is an accessibility feature of like your background music, your mobs, like very, like every little thing is an accessibility feature. And I didn't even know, and I didn't even think about it until I think a couple of months ago, that dark mode on screens is an accessibility feature.
100%.
As someone who gets migraines just by looking at the light, like I love dark mode. And so I was like, wait, yes, it is. Oh my gosh, what? And so yeah, it's just it's everywhere and it's becoming more prevalent. And yeah, I've noticed it, like you said, even in the last 5 years.
There's something
the universal design benefit is what you're talking about, Mac and Cheese.
Yeah. There's so many things out there that we use, obviously, as blind players that can benefit players who, you know, are not blind or don't have a disability, or we might not know that something is an accessibility feature. Like, I always tell the joke of how I used to hate rumble on controllers. Like, I always wondered, like, why does a controller need to rumble? It's so obnoxious. It doesn't do anything for me. Of course, this is me as I'm slowly losing my vision over time. Nowadays, I'm like, oh my God, I better have haptics on this controller, or I'm not gonna know anything.
Rumble or riot.
There's so much feedback you get from your controller rumbling when it's supposed to, and I just think sometimes it's just not even really understanding why something happens in a game, or like why there's a feature in this game, or how something is functioning and how it can help a player. That's something as well. And, you know, just, you know, for me, the more I started losing my vision, the more and more I started to realize, all these little sound cues and the master volume control, like all these things, they are accessibility. I guess I wasn't at a point in my lived experience where I could consider that and like step away and really see it for what it was worth.
Sure.
That makes a lot of sense. There's something that Josh said that has been just buzzing in my brain for like the last 10 minutes. And he said that by adding in accessibility features, it allows developers with disabilities to also be able to work in game dev. And I had never even, it feels so obvious in hindsight to hear, right? Like you hear it and it's one of those things you're like, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. If you want people to be able to do a thing, you make it accessible for them to do. But I never considered it in the opposite direction of when studios work on creating accessibility tools, not only do they make the games more accessible for players, they make the game development process more accessible for more people. And indie devs don't really have that same kind of constraint because like Shift is saying, like he can just make a cozy game that's kind of music based on the things that he's dealing with. Or Zach's saying I can make this the reflect mechanic in my game have a more lenient timing because I know the things I have to deal with. But I never bloody considered you guys have made all these tools for low vision gamers. I can now work on a game as a low vision individual because I know the tools already exist. And it's the chicken or egg thing that I don't think I ever considered before. But there was a question that came up in chat that I want to kind of throw in because I think that we will get some good answers from it. And I think I have one person in particular in the class who I want to call upon. That's a small hint as to whose turn it's going to be. Terry, I'm not going to pronounce your last name because I will jack it up. But Terry said, do you know of a good resource for language and concepts related to this topic? As an educator, one way that, don't scroll away, chat. As an educator, one way these things, chat, stop that. As an educator, one way to get these things into the pipeline to admins up the chain is to have domain-specific language and concepts to explain and persuade. And I think Stefik is probably the best person to speak to that as a fellow educator.
So The answer to this question is not what I expected it to be. So oddly enough, in like 2009, 2010, we had some projects in my research lab related to that were funded by the National Science Foundation, which is what funds a lot of my work. And we were doing some tests with blind computer programmers that were very young, like in the teenage style range. And what's interesting about it is that at the time, and today too, a lot of the technologies that kids learn to program, because if you want to be a professional dev, you have to start somewhere. That means you start when you're a kid, you learn some stuff, and then you go. But interestingly, almost every major team across the world moved to visual technologies to do the coding. So ironically, you would be using a quote unquote programming language that was visual, which you cannot use to invent all the technologies that when you invent them, you also cannot use because they don't build in accessibility support. But here's the rub. So we started running some tests with human beings, meaning, with their permission and all the ethics and all the stuff that implies, like inject them or anything. I don't know. Yes. Anyway, but interestingly, the actual tools that these kids could use were typical programming languages. They have names like C++ or Java or whatever. But here's the catch. It turns out that these programming languages were actually not designed for people. And when we started doing these tests, this became a very controversial thing in the academic literature. By 2013, we found that many of the programming languages young people use, including the AP standard in the United States, are so poorly designed that you can roll dice, create programming languages randomly, and they're just as easy to understand for humans. And when you think about it, yeah, it's really true. Like we ran a formal randomized controlled trial and then replicated the formal randomized controlled trial. It's now been replicated by other groups. We have other evidence from teams in other countries that give you basically the same answer. And it turns out the reason these programming languages are so bad for humans is because the programming language community actually got caught. They were not using the scientific method at all. And somehow this got past peer review. In fact, this fellow in Finland named Antti Hanikka-Janaho found evidence that in a 60-year period, including every major award, Turing Awards, the top award in the field, all sorts of stuff, actually only 22 studies had been written. Now think about that in 1 second. Like in the medical field between 1990 and 2001, there was like 100,000 randomized controlled trials, and in the entire field of computer science, which costs the United States $0.6 trillion per year, we did 22 experiments. That's insane. That just makes absolutely no sense.
The math isn't mathing.
Yeah, I know. $0.6 trillion and 20 studies. That seems fine. And it just blows my mind. But since they weren't taking into account humans at all, you can bet your butt that they also weren't taking into account kids that were blind, people with different conditions, people with color blindness, men, women, older people, younger people. I mean, the whole spectrum is what you really need to study to make this, as Josh said, universally designed. Anyway, that's a long-winded answer. I've studied this in great detail for years. Terry's question is lovely. I loved it, but it's a hard question. This is a tricky area, right?
Amount of money for that amount of experiments is blowing my mind. Thank you, Terry Shenold, for your question, and thank you for telling me in chat how to say your last name. Because if not, I would have jacked it up. So I appreciate that. As we're kind of getting to the end of our time, because we decided, we were having such a good chat, we went an additional kind of 30 minutes over, which I could sit here and talk to you guys.
This is so interesting. Yeah, I love this all. This is great.
As each of you have said something and it's made me go, wait, I have more questions than I have time to ask them. So last question, and this is going to be a little different because for the most part, we've kind of specifically asked individual people questions. This is going to be the first time that I kind of throw a question up and let whomever wants to answer it. But in your specific opinion, with your lived experience, with all of the things that makes you you, how do you envision the future of accessible games to look?
I suppose I can jump in really quick, at least from the perspective of the Games for Blind Gamers Jam. I would really love for us to continue being a space for innovation, for accessibility in games for the coming years. However, ideally, I would love for us to build a world where something like Games for Blind Gamers Jam is entirely unnecessary. In fact, I would love a world where accessibility is a core principle and baseline in everything that we do. And I believe that conversations exactly like this are how we're going to get there.
Well, I definitely hope that Games for Blind Gamers sticks around for a long time, because as someone who's participating in it, it's allowed me to learn and be exposed to a lot of parts of development that I usually don't get to be involved with as an accessibility consultant. You know, getting to talk to the programmers and their coding, getting to sit and watch the artist, talk to the sound designers and see as they're building. It's so amazing, and I don't think, I know it's going to make me a better consultant, but it might also inspire me to want to create my own game. And I already would love to try next year to put my own team together and make my own game. So I feel like, I would love to see more blind developers and creators creating games and, leading their own games that have blind accessibility. And I think like a forum and a community like Games for Blind Gamers is a great start to, start seeing more and more of that becoming a reality.
From my perspective, working specifically in AAA gaming, my grand, beautiful vision for what I would love the industry to move toward would be that from day one of the development of any new IP, that there is an accessibility consultant on staff full-time, that there's an accessibility team. You have your design team, you have your audio team, you have your art, environment, narrative. You need an accessibility team on staff from the beginning to lead and drive those initiatives across the studio from day one.
Well said.
Thank you.
Not just one person, but a team.
I'll jump in and just say, I actually think the future is pretty bright about it. I mean, right now, I think a lot of the accessibility is in its infancy, but I think a lot of the research is hinting that there isn't a whole lot in the graphics space that's not possible. Like, I actually think I couldn't put a year on it, but I think it's actually possible we could have blind visual effects engineers, blind 3D modelers. All that stuff actually feels quite possible, given where the tech seems to be going. And the reason I mentioned that specifically is because if you have people that are creators in addition to those that are users, it just makes it a lot easier to grow that team that Josh is talking about, so that we have kind of like a pipeline of people that know this stuff, they eat it in and out, they know what to do, they have good ideas, they can practice, they can make mistakes, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I actually feel really encouraged that a lot of this stuff is actually moving in the right direction, over time. Could be wrong, but that's my hunch.
Yeah, no, just to follow up on that, I honestly feel like accessibility is in a really good place, and I feel like it's honestly just going to keep getting better and better as people are creating more tools, or people with disabilities are getting more involved. I really see a bright future for it. It's like if it's come this far in like just the past like 5 or 6 years, like I can't even begin to fathom what it'll be like in 10 years. Like we're probably going to have so many great ideas that people bring in to help increase accessibility, great tools that can like easily be used to help make games or even like add on to games. Like I think it's going to be, we have a really good future ahead of us, basically.
Oh yeah. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on this panel. It's been enlightening hearing everyone's perspective, and just I learned a ton of things new today. And so I hope everyone else at home did as well. if anyone wants to follow you guys or know what upcoming projects you guys are doing, game jams, please let's go around in the order that we started earlier in the stream. Take it away, Shift, with where can people find you and follow your work?
Sure thing. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm shiftBacktick. You can find my work at my Web 1.0 website, shiftbacktick.io. I've got a nice RSS feed you can follow. It'll also link you to Steam and Itch. Thank you.
I guess that means I'm next, right?
Yeah.
Please follow me on LinkedIn. My name, Chad Boughton, B as in boy, O-U, T as in tango, O-N as in November. Follow me, connect with me. I'd love to talk to you. Of course, I'm on Twitter at Unsighted Parasite, capital U-N-S-Y as in Yankee, T-E-D, capital P-A-R-A-S-Y as Yankee, T-E, Unsighted Parasite. Those are the two main things that I kind of visit and go on. And I do have a website, unsighted.com, for my small business. So if you're anyone in the U.S. that would like to have a live demonstration of the power of blind accessibility in video games, I'd love to do it for you.
I think that's me. So Andreas Stefik, I'm a professor at UNLV. You can find me there. I don't really have social media. I don't think I've been on a Twitch stream before. So I'm not sure I understand this world at all. But I will say we do have a website that we use especially for people to learn to code, where we've been trying to use evidence in the scientific method to make it better. That's called the Quorum programming language. It's freely available. It's used all over the country for especially school kids. And everything that gets made is accessible out of the box. Pretty much no matter what you do. You build a chart, it's accessible. You don't do anything. You build a 3D game, you just click the button and then it's there. That's at quorumlanguage.com if you're interested. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm also not super on the socials, a little bit here and there. LinkedIn probably is actually the best place to find me. So if you just search my full name, Joshua Duchesne, I will come up on there. And I do have a URL. I have joshuaduchesne.com. Currently just redirects to my YouTube. But someday that will be a website where I'll have a lot more of my ideas and writings about accessibility design. So go there for now. And yeah, thank you all.
And you can find me on most social media platforms at Clothmans, CLOTHMANZ. I'm also Zach Clothier, ZACHCLOTHIER on LinkedIn. Those are the places you can reach out to me. Or you could also, I guess, reach out to the Microsoft Gaming Accessibility Testing Service. That's where I work as well, and we can provide feedback for other games and such.
You guys are amazing.
No, you. All right, everyone. I hope today's discussion inspired you to explore more accessibility in your game design and perhaps make something for the Games for Blind Gamers 5 during the month of February. It isn't too late to get started. You can check out their itch.io page. That will be in the chat coming up soon. And feel free to join their Discord, which is active all year round, for questions as well. And don't think the discussion ends there, y'all. Seattle Indies has a new accessibility channel in our Discord. Under specialties, we'll have a link to our Discord in the chat, so don't worry about it. And talk about what accessibility means to you. What kind of games would you want to see if they existed? And what technical challenges are you facing? And see who has ideas to help you solve them. It's a great community.
And on top of that, the Quorum Discord is another resource if you want to discuss accessibility more broadly and make games with others that care deeply about accessibility. This summer, if you're in the Vegas area, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, the Running Rebels, if I'm not mistaken, is hosting the 17th annual Quorum Conference on Accessible Game Design. Now, just one thing I have to say that is very important to get out. All of this would not be possible without our generous sponsors and Patreon supporters. For as little as $1 per month, you can support Seattle Indies and help us put on great events just like this one. Go to patreon.com/Seattle Indies to find out more. I have been Alchemist Joker. You can find me everywhere as Alchemist Joker.
And I'm Mac and Cheese, please. You can find me everywhere as Mac and Cheese, please. That's a P1Z.
And I look forward to the next time that we're able to talk to you about game devs. And so to sign off the way I often sign off. Until next time, chat, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep those gloves up, all right? See you guys later.